Thank you, Commissioners. So just to recap how we got to this point today, in May of 2022, the board granted me and staff permission to request 2 contracts be reopened in the District 3 collective bargaining agreement to address the impacts of dramatic increases in cost of living and staff retention, and to aid the district in not only retaining its existing talent, but acquiring new talent to address our staffing deficiencies. On May 27th, 2022, myself and the senior staff entered collective bargaining negotiations with District 3 from Local 1826. We did come to terms on these 2 articles, which are presented in your packet today. The total cost of the agreement is $2,315,000. Myself and the Director of Finance have done extensive evaluations on the proposal that is in your packet that I present to you today for ratification. And we have determined that over the near and midterm, 3 to 5 years, this is a sustainable package. We are confident that we can sustain this without any threat to district solvency. So with that, I present it to you for consideration for ratification. As you all know, we had a special meeting scheduled on June 22nd. Due to my unfortunate circumstances of contracting both COVID-19 for the second time and influenza, I was too sick to proceed, so I needed to cancel that board meeting. So that there is no punitive impact or any fiscal impact, I would ask if you ratify today, we make this effective June 28th, 2022. That would have been the normal effective date per the terms of the collective bargaining agreement if we would have had our meeting on June 22nd, 2022. Thank you for your consideration.
Any questions, John?
None, thank you.
None.
None.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? I'll make a motion to approve and ratify the District 3 collective bargaining agreement, Articles 22 and 14, with an effective date of June 28, 2022. Do we have a second? Okay, any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Congratulations. We had planned for a recess. I'm not sure that's...
It's completely up to you. Congratulations to you guys. Okay. And thank you to the board.
If I may, our crews were intending to be here today. We had some mechanical issues that are actually coming up, but definitely appreciate the board's work on this.
Yes, thank you all for your work and trusting in our evaluation and data to get this done. It's very important work.
Do you need some AV time?
Yeah.
We should take a recess so we can,
Take
a recess so we can get his AV figured out.
Let's take a 10-minute recess. Go back.
It's a private job.
Item is the salary range adjustments for administrative staff. And Chief?
So with as we all know, the cost of living, inflation, recruiting new talent and retaining talent in the organization is vital. There are some key administrative staff positions that, based on our analysis of like-for-like beachfront communities as well as Federal Department of Labor statistics, are requiring some adjustments. These are our support service positions, our information technology, human resources, and our executive administrative support personnel. Based upon that data and careful review, it is my recommendation that we move those salaries to a comparable market range. We cannot meet the full study as far as the top ends. Our methodology was to focus on entry and midpoint And long-term goal, we may look at comparables as an employee gets to the top end of agreement or the top end of their tenure with the organization. But what we presented to you today with the salary ranges are competitive with the market and other like-sized communities for the job functions that these positions perform for the district as an independent entity. It's my recommendation for board consideration that you consider passage of these salary range adjustments.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Discussion. Jackie?
Just a comment, I think it's always good to stay on top of these things before we get too far behind, and we are already behind on this one, so I'm fully supporting.
I think it's, as with our firefighters, we're trying to make this right for everybody. So, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the salary range adjustments for administrative staff.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
And we're going to make this retroactive to June 28th as well, correct?
That's correct.
Retroactive to 20.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next item is the preliminary budget presentation, and that would be the chief.
All right, well, it is that time of year. I'm excited to do this presentation for you and the community and to our staff. This is my first preliminary budget presentation to all of you guys, so I am very excited to do it, and it's my honor to talk about our future. So this is the preliminary budget presentation for fiscal year 2022-2023. To remind everyone, in this session, our goal is to give you guys enough information about our preliminary projections for our reserve needs, our anticipated expenses in the new fiscal year, and our anticipated projected revenues, to give you enough information for you to understand and digest. For our next meeting, you will set the truth and millage notice to the community, which is the maximum millage rate. We can always adjust from whatever the trim notice, the truth and millage notice is. That's the maximum rate you can oppose. We can drop it down from that level. It isn't the set millage rate. That doesn't get set till later in September. But this session today is to give you enough information to make that decision the next time we meet in July. So, with that said, I want to talk a little bit about our budgetary philosophy with the district. So, every year when the budgetary process starts, our adopted strategic plan is the first document that comes off the shelf. That document is a living document in our organization because that helps give us community, board, as well as our internal stakeholders, what they're telling us our funding priorities should be, or what our strategic goals are, the organizations, and we match those priorities with the anticipated fiscal year over year. Our primary focus is one of sustainment. We are primarily focused on sustainment of district operations and district solvency. In order to do that, we forecast economic conditions for a period of 1 to 5 years. And we know that those projections, the most reliable data set that we have to work off of is 1 to 3 years. After year 3, the data, year 5 becomes questionable. Anything past 5, it's just not a reliable data set to make large decisions on. This slide represents our budgetary benchmarks. We start our budget very early because it's very important because we're talking about solvency of the district. So we start in January and we work all the way through September in building the budget that we operate off of on in the next fiscal year. So you see today we have our budgetary presentation in July. Our next meeting, you will set the trim rate, and then through September and the final budget hearing and adoption. So This was very important to both myself as the fire chief and district manager and to our director of finance to put into this presentation so our community and everyone understands how our budget works. The district operates out of one general fund. That's common for a special district, and it's different from other general purpose governments. And when I say general purpose governments, I'm talking about Town of Fort Myers Beach, Lee County, City of Cape Coral, City of Fort Myers, which typically operate multiple funds. They'll have a city's general fund or a county general fund. They'll have a capital infrastructure fund. They'll have different funds for different purposes. In our case, we operate out of one general fund. That general fund consists of our anticipated revenues, funds carried forward from the prior year, our expenses, and then finally our reserves. Now, a little bit about funds carried forward. It's very important, and there's a lot of confusion when we talk about funds carried forward from a previous fiscal year. We always got to keep in mind that those aren't always unallocated funds. Funds carried forward from budget year to budget year, for example, in this year, we have 2 new rescues that we've ordered and we've been waiting on. Well, those 2 rescues total $650,000, and we don't pay for a capitalized asset or any asset until we receive it. So those funds get carried forward into the budget year, the new budget year, and immediately reallocated into that current fiscal year budget. They're known as prepaid expenses. And there's other examples of those. Professional services for the new facility is another example. This fiscal year, we will not expend what we project we will need for professional services. Those funds will be carried forward and reallocated into the new budget. So it's not, my point to that discussion is, it's not like there's a windfall of cash. So all of these factors, when we go through them to get to this point, gives myself and staff a projected millage rate required to sustain district operations for another fiscal year. I put this visual representation up here. On the left-hand side shows our streams of revenue and their breakdown. As an independent district with a limited purpose, as a limited purpose government, the state gives us limited revenue streams. So in our case, ad valorem or property tax accounts for approximately 92.7% of our revenue streams, followed by user fees. These are inspection fees and EMS transport fees, which account for 7%, followed by any sales of capital assets, which historically are around 0.3%, followed by miscellaneous sources of income, interest paid on to the district, donations, etc., and followed by impact fees, which is our smallest percentage, 0.001%. We're an older built-out fire district. There's not new growth like other fire districts that experience large growth. We're a redeveloping community, but we're not a growth community. So I want to talk a little bit about our assigned reserves. What do I mean when I say assigned reserves? These are savings accounts, if you will, of money that the board, through board policy, have assigned. The assignment means that the board has declared a special purpose for those reserve accounts, that the monies used, the funds that are expended from there, cannot be expended without it matching the assigned purpose of that reserve. So our current district reserve accounts in this fiscal year consist of a capital infrastructure bridge reserve. Kind of a funny name. Everybody knows what capital and infrastructure is, but what is bridge? What does bridge mean? This is the assigned reserve that the board has directed myself and staff to draw from every year for the period of October 1st till the end of December. That period of time is the period of time where the district is awaiting new tax revenues to come into the district. When we receive those revenues, that amount gets replenished into the reserve. So that's why it has capital infrastructure and bridge attached to this reserve. We have a disaster reserve, a millage sustainment reserve, a firefighter cancer fund reserve, and an OPEB reserve or other post-employment benefit reserve. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our capital infrastructure and bridge reserve. This reserve consists of all items with a value of $5,000 or greater. That's the state's defined capitalization threshold. And essentially this reserve, when you think of this reserve, we are planning for our tomorrow today with this reserve. It also consists of groups of assets with a value of $5,000 or greater. So what do I mean by that? A portable radio, or this laptop computer is probably a better representation due to inflationary cost. So this computer will not be $5,000, but if we need to buy 10 of these computers, we'll cross the capitalization threshold and we want to account and plan accordingly. These buy classifications in this reserve are known as unallocated asset classes because they don't fit into a particular asset class. The capital infrastructure and bridge reserve operate on a straight line depreciation model. What do I mean by that? So we purchase an asset, whatever that asset is, it's $5,000 or $10,000, while staff then goes out, does some research, and estimates what its useful life is. That purchase price of the asset gets divided by its estimated useful life, and that gives us a depreciation savings goal per year. Then we take that depreciation savings goal per year and we project in an estimated inflation rate, which then accumulates into what the district's annual savings goal to replace that asset into the future will be and the amount we need to save each year incrementally. So at the end of the useful life, we can replace that asset accounting for inflation and the time impact on money. These are our asset classes, and we have an asset class and we have one savings class, which is highlighted in red. Now, savings class is kind of a chief term. This is building repairs and maintenance. So things like paint on the building. You know, there's not anything really tangible other than the paint that goes on the exterior walls. But the cost of that service is of such magnitude when we do it that we wanted to save appropriately with minimal impacts to the millage rate and minimal impacts onto our community. So this chart here is a schedule of our planned contributions to this reserve and our planned purchases. So you'll notice that I'm saying planned. The capital infrastructure reserve is built out till 2038 with all of our anticipated and planned capitalized purchases over that period of time. So the red line at the top is relatively stable over that period of time. That represents our planned and budgeted contributions to this reserve. What changes over time, and at some points dramatically, are our scheduled withdrawals or planned purchases. So you see, coming into 2024, we're already planning for the replacement of a new fire engine. Then we follow by a period where there's relatively very little withdrawals, very nominal withdrawals, and then we have another large upswing in 2027. But what's important for our community to understand is we're planning, we're saving, and with savings that are relatively modest and stable over the long term, that allows us to provide the community with a relatively stable millage instead of every year, oh, hey, we need a fire engine, and we see a big uptick in millage and then down soaring. We're planning for the long term here. It's a marathon, not a race kind of mentality. So, as you saw, our capital infrastructure reserve consists of fleet replacement planning. So our current fleet funding methodology is we use cash purchases for light support vehicles and rescues or ambulances. And then we do a blended finance cash model for the ladder truck and fire engines. Our service replacement plan for our fleet is for fire engine and ladder trucks. We're planning to keep them for 12 years on the front line and 3 years in reserve status. This allows, at the end of that 15-year period, for a moderate cost recovery on that asset. Our ambulances, our plan currently is 8 years, or if the cumulative maintenance cost exceed what the vehicle's worth, that would be a trigger for us to replace that asset early. And for light and support vehicles, it's 6 to 10 years, or again, cumulative maintenance cost. If maintenance costs are exceeding the value of the vehicle, it makes no sense for us to continue to put good money chasing bad. So our anticipated near-term and mid-term fleet replacement schedule is we have a 2004 fire engine that's going to be up for replacement in 2 years. We have another frontline engine that's up in 3 years, a battalion chief vehicle in 3 years, and 2 administrative F-150s in 3 years. Our capital infrastructure reserve also plans for facility replacement. Now, when I talk about facility replacement, I'm specifically talking about Station 32 and Station 33. Station 32, our anticipated replacement date is 2049. I will not be your fire chief then. The savings goal that we currently have set is $3 million. Our current balance at year end 2022 will be $248,504. Then when we look at Station 33, our replacement date is anticipated to be 2048. Our savings goal is $1.8 million. Our current balance is $185,406. And the funding model is a 20/80 model, 20% cash, 80% finance. This chart shows our different assets in our one savings class, our balance that we're projecting at year end 2022, our 2023 deposits, and our anticipated 2023 expenditures from this reserve. These are more of a detailed list of what expenditures we are anticipating from this reserve, this particular reserve in 2022 and 2023, totaling $1,350,591. So in fiscal year 2022-2023, I'm going to make some specific recommendations for board consideration. I want to change the fleet funding methodology. I want to move to 100% self-funded or all-cash model for our fire engine purchases, our ambulances, and our light support vehicles, and maintain the 20/80 funding model for the replacement of the ladder truck in the future. My reason for these recommendations is the increasing cost of credit. As we all know, as consumers, interest rates are on the move, and it's the same for governmental entities. Secondly, Chief Worth and I have already been proactively starting to meet with fire engine manufacturers. We know the cost has gone up on fire engines dramatically in some cases, but being an all-cash buyer puts the district and the community in the best negotiation position to get the absolute best deal for those apparatus when we go to replace them. And with a large capital infrastructure, with the construction of a new facility, we need to improve the organization's debt capacity, or in everyday life, our debt to income ratio. So when we start shopping for debt services for the new facility, we can get the community the absolute best terms for what will be a long-term debt service. So I want to move on to the disaster reserve. Our projected balance in fiscal year 2022-2023, as long as we don't have a major event occur, knock on wood, is $1.2 million. This is the amount needed for a 30 days all-hands operation post-disaster, such as a major hurricane impacting the district. This accounts for personnel cost and the use of consumables until the state and federal emergency management authorities start coming in and writing checks. And I will have no recommended changes for fiscal year 2022-2023 to this fund. I want to talk specifically about the Millage Sustainment Fund. This fund was created by the Board of Fire Commissioners following the Great Recession. The purpose is to stabilize district funding should a major economic crisis occur. This was a great start for us to have a plan. As a long-term tenured employee, we didn't really have a plan when the Great Recession occurred. So this was a good start that you guys have maintained, so kudos to you, because it provides a blanket of safety, not only for district solvency, but as your fire chief, more importantly to me, all the people that work for the district, we have a plan to maintain solvency, to prevent layoffs for a period of time, allow for us to work with our labor partners if we need to negotiate concessions, and all while sustaining district solvency. Our historical funding goal has been $1.2 million. In fiscal year 2022-2023, I'm going to make some specific recommendations to the board for consideration. I want to change our organizational funding goal. I want to change it to $2 million. And I want to achieve that goal over a period of time. And the source will be, at the board's discretion, you can direct any portions of unallocated fund at your end to this fund to help us reach that savings goal of $2 million. Why am I making these recommendations, you may ask? We have a lot of economic uncertainty. We have a lot of political uncertainty, both domestically and internationally, with a war waging in Europe. We don't know what the long-term impacts of that will be. And we also have some sociological uncertainty. With all these uncertainties in three major facets of our society, locally, statewide, and nationally and internationally, any one of these events with a major change in fundamental philosophies or directions can cause a significant economic downturn. So I want us to be proactive and plan for these things moving into our future. So I want to talk a little bit about our OPEB reserve. So our OPEB reserve, our current balance is $765,860. This was created in 2018 with financial reporting changes which said, hey, if the Florida retirement system becomes fiscally insolvent, you have to declare that total amount. Hey, if your VEBA, your Voluntary Employment Benefits Association, becomes insolvent, you have to declare that amount. So it's a statement in our audit. The amounts is a statement in our audit, but we do not necessarily have to have a specific assigned reserve and carry those funds. One, no entity is able to account if the Florida retirement system becomes fiscally insolvent. And two, what we have learned over this last 4 years that we've had this reserve is our VEBA funding is managed through a binding legal agreement through our collective bargaining agreements with District 3 and District 15. So we have to guarantee funding for the VEBA under the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. So the funding source is secure. So with that, our assessment is the reserve isn't particularly necessary, and the assigned funds can be better utilized in other areas of our reserve savings. So what are my recommendations for this reserve? I want to reallocate the funds as follows. I want to move $629,995 to the capital and infrastructure reserve. Why that amount? When Jane and I sat down and did our projections in the funding changes for fire engines, this was the amount of money that we would need as a catch-up phase. We have this money sitting in this reserve account. We can do our catch-up to the capital infrastructure with the money we already have saved with minimal impacts to the taxpayer. It accounts for the catch-up phase for change acquisition philosophy, no impacts to the taxpayer. And then secondly, I'd like to move $135,855 would be my recommendation to the board to the millage sustainment reserve, which would move us up to $1.2 million in that reserve and start us towards our incremental our organization funding goal. Then in fiscal year 2022-2023, I am going to recommend that we establish an new assigned reserve for the Station 31 headquarters project. This will be a new reserve account for the organization. It will transition from a reserve account at some point to a construction fund where we will pay for the construction of the new facility when we're getting ready to turn shovels. It'll be specifically for the Station 31 and headquarter replacement project. And we're going to start it with the balance of money we already have saved within the capital infrastructure plan. So we're not looking for new monies or new seed monies. We already have a pot of money sitting in the reserve for this project. We'll transfer it to this assigned reserve. And at year end, if there's any unallocated funds, the board can direct a portion or all of those unallocated funds specifically to this reserve. And if we reparcel the property we have and we can make it work and there's enough viable Estero frontage and the board elects to sell that frontage to help fund the facility, I would strongly recommend to the board that the entire proceeds of that sale go directly to this fund to help build the facility. Now, what are our goals for this facility? The goal that I am setting, that is ultimately your decision, is that I want to have saved enough cash to be at a 50% cash flow into the project of the guaranteed maximum price of the facility. So right now, say for example, the guaranteed maximum price with fixtures, furnishing, site improvements come in, and I'm just using hypothetical figures here, come in at $14 million. Our goal will be $7 million cash before we start construction. The reason for that is the more cash we bring into this project will result in a manageable long-term debt for the community. This is going to be a 30-year long-term debt for this community, and we want it to be at an amount that's reasonable that we can sustain over the long term. So we'll move on to our anticipated expenses for fiscal year 2022-2023. Our anticipated operational expenses are $4,753,835. That represents a 3.9% increase from 21-22's budget. What are our driving factors? No surprise, inflation and fuel costs. On the right-hand side for board review, I've prepared a 20-year operational expense trend for you to review. And you'll see that there have been periods of historic highs and historic lows, such as the period of 2004, 2005 to 2010, when our emergency service model changed. We brought a third station online, hired additional staff, vehicles, etc. That represents our historic highs, followed by some historic lows during the Great Recession years, and then a steady but manageable upward climb. It's important when we talk about the fire district's operation and the operational expenses in general, and even including personnel cost, we are trying to provide a service to the community which public safety service, whether you're talking law enforcement, you're talking fire and emergency medical services, is the third or fourth most costly municipal service to provide in any given community. So what I'm seeing isn't unusual in any of our expense projections. So our anticipated total personnel cost will be $12,122,220. That's an increase of 3.2%. What are our driving factors? Again, cost of living. When we look at cost of living for our staff and our personnel, we really look at some key areas, which is fuel, food, housing, and childcare. We also are contending with the local employment market, which is changing the value of certain skilled professions, as well as we are also combating the minimum wage factor, which we all know minimum wage has drastically moved over the last couple of years. On the right-hand side, I've prepared for you a 20-year personnel cost trend, which again show our ebbs and tides over the years. This represents an industry norm of 77.8% of the district's total budget. So authorized district staffing, this coming fiscal year, this cost out gives us a total authorized staff of 63 with 3 emergency service models, an ideal model which represents excellence in service, which is 3 staff fire apparatus, two rescues on the road every day, and a battalion chief. A moderate model, which is two staff fire apparatus, 2 staff rescues, and a battalion chief. And a minimum model, which is 2 engines and 2 ambulances. No battalion chief. Our goals in having emergency service models are to minimize and control our overtime cost, but more importantly to me is to control or eliminate mandatory overtime. On the right-hand side, I prepared a 20-year chart comparing our operating costs to our personnel costs for your review. So we'll talk a little bit about our revenue projections. So this year, based on a 14% property valuation increase in the district, our rollback rate is 2.6463 mils. Now the rollback rate, I've discovered there's a lot of confusion when we talk about the rollback rate in the community. The rollback rate represents the millage rate that will bring in the exact amount of revenue from the previous fiscal year. So if the board elects to set us at a rollback rate of 2.6463, that will place us in a very slight budgetary deficit of approximately $9,999. I am going to recommend to the board that we maintain the current millage rate of 29851, which based on our projections will give us a portion of unallocated funds to help us fund the Station 31 and headquarters project. Still too early to give you precise projections because we're still finalizing some things in the budget, but at that millage rate, we will have room to plan for our future with the new facility. The rollback rate implications that I have identified is it keeps us at a minimum emergency service model on more days than what we would probably prefer once we get our staffing addressed. It does not plan for new facility construction. It poorly accounts for escalation and inflation, and it represents basic sustainment of district operations. If we go with the recommended rate of 2.9851, it allows planning for the Station 31 construction project. It allows for sustainment of district operations. It increases our emergency service delivery more, and it accounts for escalation and inflation. Millage rate at 2.9851 also allows us to meet 5 of our key strategic objectives in our adopted strategic plan, which are strategic priority number 3, implement financial and revenue strategies to sustain current and meet future needs. Strategic priority number 4, achieve operational efficiency. Strategic priority number 6, efficiently and effectively respond to emergencies. Strategic priority number 9, recruit and train for excellence throughout the workforce. Strategic priority number 10, ensure capacity to meet staffing needs at all levels of the organization. This slide represents a snapshot of the preliminary budget with the rollback rate. This slide represents what the preliminary budget would look like at the 2.9851 rate. And with that, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I thank you for your time, and I'm open for any questions.
At this time, I'll open this to the public. Any public comments on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of it. John, would you have any questions?
Great presentation, Chief. I appreciate all the hard work you and the staff put in on compiling this once again for our annual tasking, but it's definitely our most important mission as a board to ensure that we're able to sustain the district, to pay our members, to keep operations going. But I really don't have any questions on it. It's been thoroughly explained, and great job. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ron?
To echo John, thank you for the detailed presentation. It gives us a good idea how we can reach our goals and afford it. Thank you.
Again, echo the same thing. The detail in the presentation kind of speaks for itself and is very self-explanatory. Just on a couple of comments, I'm very glad to see that the budget addresses the capacity to meet staffing needs as well as salary needs for our employees to sustain into the next year. I'm also very glad to see the budget includes taking into account the new facility, where it seemed in the past we didn't really have a mechanism that you could wrap your hands around, so to speak, to move that project forward. I think there's an expectation in the community that we're going to be getting a fire station there and a new headquarters facility. I'm glad to see that we now have a budget that reflects our commitment to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Jackie?
I echo exactly what you all said. I'm glad to see that it is providing for the building. It does make more sense. I love the layout. I think it's easier for the general public to kind of follow along with what you're trying to do or what we're trying to do here. I think it makes a lot of sense. And we are in uncertain times right now. We can't, based on the last few years, I think we can all comfortably say you can't project what's coming, even in the next year. So I like that we have some cushion in there so that we're able to do things like, assist with salaries for all staff and things like that. It just gives us a little more flexibility to see what's going to come down the road here to us. So great job on that. Thank you.
I would echo the same comments concerning the last couple slides about the rollback rate. And I know we'll get into this in future meetings, but I'm not in favor of going to the rollback rate because you do that to accommodate the money that's coming in this year and next year. As of December, we have to decide. Next year, there's an economic downturn, and now you're asking people to raise it back again, and you're chasing that all along. We don't know what the future will hold. So I think if we have a sustainable budget at the current rate, 2.9851. So that was going to be my recommendation. But other than that, I think we're in good shape. So thank you so much for the presentation. Jane, thank you for all the work that you did putting this together. Okay, any other comments? Okay, can we move along? Okay.
Yeah.
The next item is dates for the preliminary and final budget hearing.
So Commissioners, at the next, we will need to set a preliminary budget hearing, which is, staff has identified 3 potential dates. which is September 14th, 15th, and 16th for a preliminary budget hearing.
And what days are those?
That is a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Now, we do have a work session scheduled for 9 a.m. On Wednesday, the 14th.
I prefer if we could continue on that day and just keep going.
Right, well, we could,
After 5 o'clock?
yeah, we have to do it after 5 o'clock, so we could, we do not have any projected needs for that work session at this point, but we could always look at that at the next meeting if we wanted to, when we set the trim notice. But I don't anticipate having a need for a work session in September, so we could always cancel that work session, renotice, and change the time to 5 to accommodate for a preliminary budget hearing if that's the board's
I have
desire.
a conflict Thursday night, so I would prefer to the Wednesday evening, if that works for everyone else.
Can we not do the work session starting at 4:30 or 4
If you
o'clock?
needed to.
Yeah, we needed to,
Or afterwards?
Right.
No.
Right.
I think the morning and the evening at the same day is probably not going to be good for others.
Right.
If we could move everything to the late afternoon evening, that would be amazing.
Yeah, do everything at once.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that.
So, we could make a final decision, we'll give you guys chance to review and confirm your schedules, and we can make a final decision at our next, July meeting, if that's okay for you.
Are you also going to have potential tentative for the final one?
Yes, we will,
All right.
yes.
I know we can't set that in.
Yes.
As a preliminary, but
Right now, we're looking at, probably, what was it, September 28th?
Same day as the.
Yeah, as
meeting.
the night meeting in September.
I'm just gonna hold this evening, just.
Yes,
Okay.
is that it for that?
yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is surplus of capital assets.
So this is some routine business of the district. We have identified some capital assets that we are going to dispose of. I've contained that capital surplus list in your reference material, which consists of some IT equipment, some thermal imagers that are at their end of useful life, and some miscellaneous IT stuff. So it's my recommendation that we go ahead and that the board approve the district staff to go ahead and surplus those assets.
Chief, under the recommended disposition, the not applicable, what does that refer to? Has to have some disposition?
It's mostly software.
It's mostly software, yes, yes.
What does NA mean?
It's not like we're just gonna discontinue funding it, discontinue the use of it, so, it's not,
It's not worth it.
yeah, it's not worth anything. It's not like we can sell the software package to another vendor or donate it to
That's what I'm
anybody.
asking is some of the items say scrap, and then this say NA, it would seem like you either scrap it or you sell it.
Are you in the reference, or the reference? Okay, let me get to that.
More of a discussion.
I don't think we actually own that software, we own a license to operate it.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
You just stop paying for the license,
Got it. That makes sense.
so you really can't scrap it because it's not.
It's not yours. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, hold on, there's a point of clarification here.
Okay.
Sorry. So the reason for this is to take the software off of our depreciation schedule, which is where it has historically been captured. And it's an adjustment in terms of the audit. It's not that we're going to continue to use all three of these programs, but they don't really belong on the depreciation schedule.
Gotcha.
And they've been completely amortized. We've retained the amount of money that we used to purchase and incrementally saved over the years in anticipation of potentially buying a new program. So that is still in reserves, but it doesn't really belong on the depreciation schedule or the fixed asset list, capital asset list.
Thank you for the
Appreciate the explanation. Okay, all right, so we need a motion, is that correct? Give me a second here. Okay. So the surplus of capital asset, do we need a motion for that, Chief?
Yes.
Motion to accept the surplus.
I'm sorry.
It's a motion to accept the surplus list as presented, and allow for disposal.
Yes, the recommended motion, a motion to surplus the assets as provided on surplus list 2022-02 and dispose of assets as recommended by staff and in accordance with all laws and rules of the state of Florida is a recommended motion.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Okay, next item, fire chief annual evaluation format change.
All right, Commissioners, so the district has, at the behest of our human resource manager, has undertaken a pretty comprehensive review of performance appraisals and how we conduct performance appraisals as an organization for all of the staff below the fire chief. So in one of our discussions with the chair, he liked some of the concepts he had heard from the human resource manager on what we were doing, and he said, you know what? I think it's time we kind of look at the fire chief's appraisal format. So in the interest of transparency, I didn't think I should be setting as your only employee format for how the board would want to evaluate me potentially in August. So with that, I asked that the board chair work directly with the human resource manager to develop a format. Once they developed a format, I was asked for, my input accordingly in that process and how we get it to this point, finalization for presentation to the board. But this was really driven by our human resource manager working with the board chair. What we have presented in your packet is the revisions to the fire chief evaluation format. And with that, Mr. Wood, do you have any additional comments?
Sure. Looking at the format that we'd used in the past, it had 6 different categories: unsatisfactory, needs improvement, satisfactory, very good, outstanding, and best in the universe. It just, it seemed really impossible to tell on any given portion of this whether it was above satisfactory, what those terms meant, and so they became almost unusable. And so we thought consolidating those to make it make more sense would be one way to go. The concept that we had, if he gets the chief gets a certain score, then we would consider giving him a raise or something like that. I don't know whether that seemed a little bit, it seemed unnecessary. If we feel the chief is doing a good job, or if the situation is that there's for example, inflation, we may decide, to do what's right regardless of the scores. But we do obviously have to have some category that states that there is some areas of concern, and just in case there are. So and the other thought was that the only time you would need to make a comment while we're doing the evaluation would be if you decide that the chief is developing in one of those areas. So rather than, if we give them the highest rating, then we have to come up with reasons for that. Instead, it makes more sense that we give reasons if there's areas that he needs to improve on or work on. So, you've all had an opportunity to look at this, and so are there any questions, concerns? Let's start with Jim.
First I wanted to say, I liked it very much. I thought it was very straightforward. It looks like a system that would be pretty easy to maneuver and to come up with a responsible evaluation. How does this evaluation format and system coincide with what is currently in use for other employees?
That is where we are developing. We have a work group under the leadership of Assistant Chief Armiger right now, which is currently evaluating this project. Our human resource manager is involved. What exists, to use Colleen's words, is antiquated and doesn't meet the modern workforce needs. When I saw the first draft, when I saw the first draft of this evaluation, I like it because it's split into 7 important categories based on the fire chief's job description. And then under those categories, there's this specified expectation for the evaluator to make a determination. So I like that specificity. There is a trend right now in all sectors of business and government and personnel management that, especially with a newer, younger workforce coming in with different generational norms, that the traditional means of conducting performance evaluations is actually counterintuitive to top performance rather than stimulating top performance. And then for the managers of those people, it just becomes a rubber stamp. We don't want a rubber stamp evaluation. We want to identify top performers. We want to identify people who maybe need a little bit of work towards performance. So this is a good example for the organization to look forward to our future and how we're going to stimulate top performance from all members of the organization.
Very good, thank you.
I think the value will be when we do our one-on-one meetings with the chief prior to the meeting where we actually assess that. That's, if you wait until one day to evaluate your employees, for example, you're waiting too long. You need to do that on a daily basis. Work with those that have needs and are developing, and not wait until to drop the hammer on a particular day. And so I think the value will be the dialogues that we have with the chief about those specific areas. And so far, he's very candid about his areas that he's developing, he's just improved, and areas that he feels he's doing well in or can do better. So I think I'm looking forward to the evaluation tomorrow. Jackie, any comments?
I like the layout, and I think it's definitely kind of mix things up and try something different and see how this works, and that might help point you to what you need to do for the rest of the staff as well. So yeah, and the one-on-one meeting, obviously, beforehand, would be most valuable to that. Because it's easy to go through it from our viewpoint, write down what we want, but, I need the feedback from you to see how you think you're doing. But we're our own worst critics, so.
It's true. Ron?
I think it's a good idea. The old evaluation was, I liken it to how payroll had to figure what the firefighters' pay was. You had 38 different boxes to check before you knew exactly how much money you make. As far as the true evaluation, as a young firefighter, I once received an evaluation of unsatisfactory from my chief. My company officer rated me exceptional. My chief rated me unsatisfactory. I had to ask permission to talk to him, which I received. And I said, how come? He said, well, you really pissed me off 6 months ago. And I said, what'd I do? He I don't remember, but it really pissed me off. So I asked for a transfer and he said, no, I'm keeping it. Which was fine, we were busy and I got to try, you know. But I'm in favor of the evaluation. And if I have a problem with you, Chief Martin, I'm gonna tell you, not in 6 months, as soon as I get the chance.
I would count on it, sir, thank you.
Mention that.
I like the format. I think it's solid. It's easy to navigate for all of us, and it takes kind of some of those middle ground. He's doing a little bit better than average, but not quite excellent. The only thing, and I don't foresee this at all currently, but do we need to provide for an unsatisfactory rating within that? At a 0, say, if that person is not meeting that goal at all. It's happened in the past. I hope it never happens again, but if it were to, it would be, I think, needed that we were able to document that as a board. And I don't foresee it would ever come to that. I think we'd kind of nip it in the bud through the year, but.
My thought, John, on that one was that I'm not going to wait until the date that we do this if the chief is doing something that's wrong.
Or not doing something.
Or not doing something at all, misfeasance or malfeasance.
Right.
Okay, we need to deal with that at the time and not wait until we have this document and then say, see, I told you. No, that's way too long.
Right, I agree with that, but
You do need a record.
I guess my thinking of is if we all said, you're still not managing it.
I agree with the chair. What you would do is probably place the chief on administrative leave, and we would have a special meeting to discuss what you wanted to do. I mean, because that would be an incident that we'd have to immediately investigate and bring back to the board.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see this documentation as being necessary to.
Right, we don't need that necessary for you to terminate.
I don't think so.
We follow the contract and even if you terminate for no cause, we know what we're doing.
Right.
Just a thought.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we want to thank Colleen for her work. She compared numerous evaluations of all over the area and all over the state, I believe, to find ones that were more up-to-date and ones that fit, that were a better fit, let's put it that way. So, at this time, did I already answer public? No. Comments? We have any public comments on the chief's appraisal form? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Okay. Do we have a motion? I'm going to have to ask Craig now.
We need another button.
So I make a motion to approve. All right, I'll do the motion, Larry, if that's fine. Motion to approve the new fire chief annual appraisal format for use before the fire chief's annual contract renewal in September of 2022.
Second. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Colleen. Okay. All right, next to Chet.
Mr. Chair, would you like to talk about since this passed, you want to talk about the timeline for this current year's fire chief evaluation?
Well, perhaps you have a better idea, but since we know that according to your contract, there's a date that we have, supposedly, we have to provide that. I guess we can probably decide to extend that, but it's coming up here.
Yes, September 22nd is my renewal date of my contract. So ideally, we want to have the review done prior to that, so we could have the public review of my performance over the last year, either in August, preferably, at one of our August meetings. So it gives you plenty of time to each individual commissioner to meet with me at their schedule allowance over the next month.
What is the meeting date, the second meeting date in August, is that the 27th?
That 24th, it appears.
24th it appears, I believe.
Yes, someone.
Yes, August 24th.
24th. Okay, so let's set the date for August 24th. Gives you approximately a month or so to meet with us.
Okay.
Sounds good. Now, we do not have to provide any documentation or anything. It's just if you read that, if you do have a comment about that's developing, have me prepared with a statement of some kind that it's not just, well, you may be bad, but instead, something that can be documented. Well, you know, you didn't attend this, you didn't do that. Okay, anything else on that one? Okay, next one, we are at Fire Chief remarks.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for another great meeting. The first thing I'd like to recognize is this morning we received a donation from the Cottage for $4,200 from their event, their Touch the Truck event that we were asked to participate in a couple of weeks ago. It was a very nice family fun event that was out there. Chief Worth, the life safety staff, Chief Arminger, all were critical parts of, you know, getting our operational folks there, thanks to the operational staff who went out there, and kids and families had a great time to look at that big, beautiful ladder truck of ours, which is always a showstopper in this community. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to Shuckers for that generous donation to the district. Just a quick disclosure, we recently received a administrative life safety mutual aid request from a partnering agency, South Trail Fire and Rescue District. They have had a significant backlog in plan review, and their fire marshal has heard of the quality that we are producing to other neighboring agencies, and they have asked for some temporary assistance from our agency. The fire official and her team did an analysis on what they're looking for, and we've determined that we could help them on a short-term 30 or 45-day basis for some larger projects they have in their district. We will stick with the same billing practices and business practices of our district. There's not an executed agreement to bring in front of you, but we're going to try to fulfill that aid request to another agency to help them get caught up on that work. July 2nd, 2022, in the early morning hours, we had a structure fire down by Fisherman's Wharf, across from Bonita Bills. Crews did an excellent job. They did an excellent job on several fronts. Not only with our primary mission of ensuring life safety, fire control, property, and environmental presentation, they did excellent customer service, excellent follow-through, excellent follow-up from our life safety staff to our administrative chief officers. And what's really a proud fire chief moment for me is that evening we had an acting battalion chief on. The fire was of such a nature, it was a deep-seated fire in a relatively hazardous building, an older building. It was acting battalion chief Joseph DeVito. He did an outstanding job. I've got comments from fire chiefs who were up at that time listening, you know, because we have fire chiefs around the county that listen to our calls once it sounds like it's, you know, the big one. And I've got numerous calls commending Captain DeVito for his radio traffic and how he managed the scenes, all the way to our first-in crew that immediately recognized it was an occupied building and put hose lines in place to protect those people and get them out of the building. So we just had an outstanding job, and I can't say enough about how proud I am of our team, from the top all the way down. So thank you to everybody that was involved in that. Just a generalized reminder, you know, hurricane season, and we're 4 weeks away from the busiest time of the Atlantic hurricane season, and the surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are extremely hot. So that's potential fuel. So just want to put a generalized reminder out to the community. If you're prepared, stay prepared, because we haven't seen the height of what's typically the busiest time of year. Also would like to take this opportunity to remind our pedestrians, our motorists, our bicyclists, and our e-bikes to please wear your helmets, Be bright at night. If you're out walking or riding a bike or on an e-bike, please be bright at night. And remember, our roadways are shared roadways here in our community. And back to driving school, the 3 C's of safe driving, courtesy, concern, and caution. Over the last few months, just so you all are aware, and we know that local media had paid a lot of attention to a condominium complex that had some foundational and structural concerns. That building has been monitored by our agency for a couple years now with Fire Official Campbell and Inspector Genoverino. With some turn in conditions, we felt it was proactive to have a plan for that, for an event of that nature for our operations team. So I met with District Chief Worth and Battalion Chief Terry Brunson, who is also a USAR Task Force 6 team leader. They are in the process of developing an operational plan for our agency for how we are going to respond in the first half hour of an incident of that magnitude in this jurisdiction. It's important for us to have those operational plans and have them exercised and reviewed because we're a barrier island. And it is going to take time for us to get operational resources, and we want to have a plan in place for that first arriving companies from our agency to guide them to safe operations. Finally, I would like to thank our team for the 4th of July. As you have all seen, there were some issues with the 4th of July event. It highlights the risk mitigation work that we do. Would like to specifically thank Bill Genoverino, Fire Official Campbell, Chief Kraus, our crews that were out there. It was really important work that they were doing this day. And I also want to thank town staff as well as the town manager, incredibly responsive to our compliance concerns. We are already working with them for their competitive bid for a new vendor. So can't say enough about the team effort that we have here on the island to ensure the community safety. And finally, just would like to thank all our staff, our firefighters, and all of you for your continued and honorable service to this district and to the community as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there is no attorney report.
Well, there is one thing I'd like to update you. I mentioned the chief and Jane. There's an issue that's coming around in the state. We have it in the Tampa Bay area. Chief was mentioning, it was brought up at FASD. There is a disruptive element of individuals that are coming into offices of government agencies for the purpose of quote-unquote auditing. And what they do is they come in and they videotape people without their permission. It's starting to become a real problem. And what happens is they put these videotapes on YouTube and they get hits and they make money that way. So the short way of dealing with this is to declare our administrative offices and fire stations as non-public forums, not that the public couldn't come in, but non-public forums for the purposes of videotaping individuals without their consent. So if somebody comes in and they don't want to leave, we can, if you pass an ordinance, we can have them trespassed and removed for at least a year of coming to that agency. We normally would see it more in the administrative offices. Obviously, we can't have people coming into the fire stations unless it's an emergency situation. So it's to protect the safety of all the employees of the district and to stop any disruption of the services that the district is providing. So there'll be something that I will draft to present to the board regarding that. But we haven't apparently seen it so much here, but it's coming. So I wanted you to be aware of that.
Of course, these meetings are on TV.
For our public, this meeting, people could come in and videotape, but they can't come into the offices and just stare at the front and start asking questions, videotaping individuals without their permission. Now, we could give permission, individuals could give their permission, but it's not an automatic, what we call a public forum like a sidewalk is, where they can videotape. Can people videotape our firefighters at a scene? Yes, if they do it from a safe location, we can't stop that. But certainly they don't have the right to come into the station and start videotaping our firefighters as they're doing their normal duties, unless we were to allow that, which would be disruptive to their performances.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, and then we do have an executive meeting following this, so, thank you. Commissioner remarks, Jackie?
So just a quick question, so you will be drafting something and bringing that back to us?
Yes.
For that, okay, because I encountered some of that in my other position, and that's good to know that we have something ready about that. Being the recipient of one of those events, it's no fun. Right. So, thank you for being on top of that. Again, thank you to the cottage, to Brian Nagel and his staff for that wonderful donation. I heard the event was amazing. Thank you to all of you who participated in it, whoever was there. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there that day, but I heard it was really a great time, and folks who attended really enjoyed it. So I think it's important. I'd like to see us participate in more stuff like that. I think it's great for the community to get out and see what we do and who we are, and the equipment, and especially the kids. So thank you. I do have to let you know that I was contacted, mostly in my other role, by one of the folks who live in that building that caught on fire, Dave Anderson, his personal friend and also involved with the chamber, and he wanted to express his MRC's thanks for the folks who responded. I'm speaking to you folks specifically because you were there. He feels very strongly that if you had not got there as you did, the way you did with the response that you did, that he and Marcy might not be alive. So he is eternally grateful. He was literally in tears on the phone, had me in tears on the phone, so thank you very much. That's really huge, and they're good people and they're good community members, and you know, they certainly at this point in their life shouldn't have to worry about stuff like this, but in this case, it worked out amazing. So, and you saved all the animals. So I know that the team there at the Otsego Bay Marine Science Center were really appreciative of that as well, because those animals mean a lot for them too, so thank you. And then fireworks, you know that I'm one of the forces behind raising funds for that, particularly for New Year's Eve, and I would be horrified if my group who raises funds for the New Year's Eve fireworks had a report back like that. So I'm so thankful to Jennifer and Bill and the rest of the life safety team for identifying those issues, for manning that event, for addressing it with the town appropriately so that we can make sure we don't have a repeat of that. And I can assure you that as one of the fundraisers for New Year's Eve, I will be actively involved in helping to choose whoever we decide to go with in New Year's Eve, so that we can best in class. That's not something to play with, and I don't want to lose our privilege that we have to have fireworks on this beach. There were thousands of people out there enjoying that show. The boats out there were incredible. I don't know if we got to see it, but it was a sea of floating lights out there watching from the water, and the beaches were full of families having a great time. So I don't want to lose that privilege, so we need to stay on top of that. So thank you for that. I think that is all that I have, so that's more than I normally say, so thank you. Your turn.
How do you follow that? I just wanted to say thank you for a great meeting. The presentation of the budget is just outstanding. I also wanted to thank the district for the opportunity for commissioners to participate in the 4th of July parade. I think it's really good for us to get out and interact with the public when it's not necessarily a life-threatening situation, particularly for our firefighters when they're out. That most of their contacts with the public, they're in service demand mode. And this way they can actually interact with the public in a more positive way, similar to what you were saying, Jack. So, and I enjoyed very much the opportunity to be out there and participate with that. So I thank you all for putting up with us as we rode along. And I appreciate the district for letting us do that.
John?
I mirror what everybody else is saying. The parade was certainly enjoyable as always, a little less attended by participants than what we've seen in the past, and we all have our opinions on that. Chief and I attended the PASA conference in Orlando. I recommend if you haven't done it or thought about the CDO certification, that it's a it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's not a lot of time, it's a couple of big bursts of time initially, and then some catch-up, some great information on not only what's going on with our jobs as far as sunshine and interagency relations, but also at the state level. They're very informative on what's coming forward. We took and were certified as mental health first aid folks, and that course I thought was outstanding. I mean, it's something I truly wish I'd had as a police officer, because of not only the folks who deal with in the public, excuse me, but your coworkers, which, you know, our family is, our folks here could probably testify to, is, you know, there's a big concern over the folks you work with, and you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to keep them safe. On a personal note, I would like to thank Chief Martin again. He's an instrumental part of why I'm still here on the planet. I had a little cardiac emergency at the end of the conference, which I thought was just uncomfortable, and it ended up being a severe 100% blockage of my left anterior descending artery. And in about 88 minutes, that was handled, thanks to somebody's experience and guidance and dedication to the job he's done for 30-ish years. So I can't thank him enough, and my wife feels the same way. So thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Can't follow that one. There you go.
Well, I can't follow that with that story.
Glad you're here.
Me too.
It pleases me that we were able to change our collective bargaining agreement, also for the administrative staff to get them where they need to be, and hopefully our economy continues and we can keep raising their salaries to meet inflation, which will be a challenge. Thank you for the budget presentation. As of the 4th of July, I was down there. I didn't know anything was wrong until the very end when they had the grand finale. They had the colorful fireworks, but they didn't have the big explosions. So I'm guessing those are some of the ones the shells that didn't fire. Now, it was packed. I was fairly close, maybe. I wasn't up, I was down within 200 yards of where you could get. And where I was, it was wall-to-wall people. So that could have been a disaster. As to our streets are shared, well, unfortunately, our sidewalks are also shared with golf carts, Harleys, e-bikes, pedestrians, people. So, I mean, you have to really be careful. So, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, obviously I can't follow these, so I'm kind of going to try. I just thank everyone for, thank you and Jane for putting together that presentation. Thanks to Colleen for doing the research and redoing the evaluation form. And other than that, look forward to the executive meeting following this one. So, if there's nothing else.
Thanks to our folks who attended and stayed through all the boredom of the housekeeping that we do up here.
It's great to see you.
If there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.